Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you sit. My name is Meg Sullivan. I'm the founder of Quorum Initiative, and this big passion project of mine focuses on how we ensure women get a seat at the table and gender parity becomes the norm. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Quorum Initiative's How We Rise Together Forum. This is our fifth How Forum, which is one of our marquee events, and it's the first time we're holding it virtually. And today is actually our second day of activities. So welcome to those who are just joining us, and welcome back to all of you that were with us yesterday. The goal for How We Rise Together is to provide a safe place for reflection and exchange on what we consider some of the most important issues of our time for the advancement of women. The pandemic has created special challenges for all of us. So hopefully, as we move into a healthier environment, that creates a perfect moment for all of us to consider, what have we been through? Where do we want to go? And how do we want to do it, both individually and collectively? We have a lot of really terrific content prepared for you today. Our sessions will be a mix of both keynote discussions and interactive breakouts. Just to give you a sense and remind you, the day ends around 12:30 Eastern. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for all that is planned, because there's just tons of not to miss moments. Yesterday, for those of you that weren't able to join us, we spent time speaking about and thinking about purposeful leadership, transitions, and creating impact. There was an incredible amount of exchange and great ideas shared, and I'm sure today will be the same and no different. One of the things I mentioned yesterday that I want to share today is I reflect on what's happening in this moment in time. What comes up for me is my unwavering belief that disruption creates opportunity, particularly for those who are willing to challenge incumbency and complacency. The pandemic has been a uniquely disruptive moment. So as we emerge, it presents this amazing moment for change. It's time for us to raise our collective voices and take collective action. We, the Quorum community, have an important role to play in ensuring this happens. To kick off today, we're going to have a brief interactive moment just to say hello to each other, check in, and set intentions. So what's going to happen next is, once I'm finished speaking, we're going to throw up a slide that tells you what breakout room to go to. If you go all the way down to the bottom of your page, you will see the breakout rooms and a join button. So please click on that button once you find your breakout. If for any reason you don't find your name on a list, just choose a breakout and join. This will be just a quick exercise to get to know each other and set up the day. So here's the instructions for what you're supposed to do once you get into those breakout rooms. Please start the discussion by introducing yourselves briefly. Then we'd love for you to share in one word where you're at the moment in relation to mind, body, spirit. Where are you at? We'd love for you to share one thing that you're grateful for and what's your intention for the day. So once again, quick intro, one word about where you're at the moment, what you're grateful for, and what's your intention for the day. So with that, I'm going to have us pull the slide up to tell you which rooms to join, and I'll let you all get to know each other a little bit. And we'll see you back here at 9:30. Please don't miss that at 9:30, so that we can start the next session with our speakers who are not to miss. So we'll see you back here at 9:30. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this little moment of breakouts and touching base with each other and your groups. I don't know about you, but there's something really great about connecting as we get ready to start the day. Helps center me and helps me be a little more present to everything that's going on around me. So I hope that was an enjoyable moment for you this morning or afternoon, depending on where in the world you're sitting. I want to tell you a little bit about our next session. The first session of speakers, the first speakers of the morning. We're going to be focusing on fixing workplaces rather than fixing the women in the workplaces. It gives me great pleasure to actually introduce you to two fantastic women who are going to talk to us a little bit about this concept. Michelle Penelope King has put words to the problem and provided tangible ideas for action in improving equality in business and, frankly, all institutions in our world today. Given her background in advising major businesses about innovation and technology, diversity and inclusion, and the advancement of women at work, whether she was in a role in-house or as a consultant, gives her these amazing insights about what is actually working and what is not. She also has views on how to create the necessary change for us to move to a new place for women in the workplace. And I also think she's got a lot of interesting ideas to share with us about her thoughts on what the new world of work might look like. So get ready for a very fruitful discussion around all of these topics. For me, I've had the opportunity to meet Michelle in multiple settings, and she is insightful, she's dynamic, and she's a true force for change. So you will enjoy hearing from her. Veronica Torres is breaking barriers herself. She's a lawyer by training. She is working in one of the most complex areas of law and business, which is in the privacy and data security space. Given what's at stake, she is required to work with all aspects of a business to achieve their business goals, making her a critical element to any situation's success, any business's success, frankly. Veronica is an absolute bright light. She is courageous, and for me, I think about her all the time as the one to watch. So you will no doubt be inspired by this conversation. So I'm going to turn things over to Veronica and get the conversation started.
Thank you, Meg. And I'm very excited to be here and with Michelle. Michelle and I met through the Quorum. She offered a couple of executive coaching sessions in the previous year, and I took advantage of that. And it was probably one of the greatest experiences I've had over any years, not just during COVID times. But it was a wonderful way to really work on pulling out values and really understanding my own purpose in my work. And I've applied them probably every day since I've sat down and developed them. So thank you for sitting down with us, Michelle. First, we'd just like to start, what led you to writing this book and seeking the career path that you've gone down?
Well, I just want to start by saying thank you for having me. It's really a privilege to be doing this session with you, and for everybody who's gifted us with your time. Thank you so much. I know how invaluable that is. This is such a great forum. To Meg for inviting me to come and speak. Honestly, such a privilege. In terms of my work, I've really been on a journey into understanding how inequality works in organizations, and I wanted to start this journey in understanding the topic because I noticed in my work in human resources and communications and organizations very early on, about 15 years ago, showing my age here, Veronica, that, women really weren't advancing at the same rate as men. And at the time, the book Lean In was really popular, and this idea that women need to do more, be more to advance at work. And I'm a researcher. I've never actually left university. So I kept saying it was 13 years. It's actually 15 years at university. I'm on degree number 5. And to solve any problem, like a good researcher, I believe that research is the way we do that. So I started researching this topic and embarked on a PhD to really understand, what is it about workplaces that results in sort of gender differences and this gender gap in leadership. And what I found is that the lean in idea is very much wrong. It's not supported by academic literature whatsoever. In fact, research finds both men and women rate women better in terms of managerial capabilities, leadership capabilities, networking, office politics, managing all of the difficult and formal elements of work. Women and men believe women have those skills and in abundance, and not only the skills needed today to succeed and lead, but importantly in the future world of work. So when I found that, to be honest, I was really disappointed because I thought there'd be like some quick fix, something I could do. And then I realized the fix for inequality is really workplaces. And so then I embarked on this full research program to really try and understand, how does inequality work? What's the problem we're trying to solve for? And what we find is that most of the solutions we put in place focus on fixing or changing women to fit into workplaces that really never value them for their capabilities and strengths. And as a result, everybody loses. Women lose because they're trying to change who they are. Workplaces lose because they don't get the strengths that women have. And, ultimately it just reinforces inequality. So my aim with my book and the work that I do with my business is really to create workplaces that not only work for women, but importantly work for men, because that's the big secret when it comes to inequality, is realizing actually the current state doesn't work for anybody. And so, how do we create workplaces where people can be themselves and be valued for that? And for me, that's what equality is. It's the freedom to be yourself and to be valued for that. And so that's kind of the work that I'm doing now.
So you mentioned that equality is not only good for women, it's also good for men. Can you expand on a little bit of that and how we can't use that research and use that as a talking point to help us when we talk about change?
I'm laughing because this is, the most important point when it comes to equality, that men need it more than women do. And I don't say that to be cheeky. It's very true if you look at the research. So, right now, men are still pretty much handcuffed to this 1950s way of leading. And the interesting thing is that might have served us in the industrial era, where you needed a hierarchy, you needed a command and control approach to working, you needed to treat everybody in the same way because everybody was the same. It was an employee who came in, did a role, very transactional. If you've seen the show Mad Men, it's a Don Draper way of leading, right? He's the main character, this 1950s white, dominant, assertive, aggressive male. The reality is the world has changed. We're now an innovation economy. And so what we need is to really harness different perspectives. And diversity is the key to innovating and outcompeting your competitors. And what type of leadership works well in that type of environment? A much more transformational approach to leading. So a leader who's democratic, caring, empathetic, who can not only, bring diversity into an organization, but much more importantly, can harness the benefits of diverse perspectives to innovate, to collaborate, to problem solve. And the problem that we have in organizations is, men are handcuffed to that transactional way of leading. In fact, my research has found in a survey of over 735 men and women that out of the top 5 capabilities required in the future world of work, most of which are that transformational way of leading, men only have 1 out of the 5 capabilities today. And that's because they're still leading and operating and managing in this 1950s way. And the reason men are is because, for too long, society has said, this is the standard of leadership, this is the standard of what it means to be a man, and the two are tied together. And so for men, deviating from that 1950s way of leading, even though it will benefit them and result in better outcomes at work, carries with it a lot of sort of social stigma because it's not what we associate in terms of what good looks like for men. So for men, the journey is really redefining what it means to be a man at work, and doing that, recognizing you're not doing that to help Michelle King or other women. You're doing that to help yourself, because a more equal workplace where you can lead in a way that's most effective depending on what the environment requires, which tends to be this more transformational way of leading, you're simply going to be better than the next person who's working in this very transactional way. So, men really need the freedom to be themselves and lead in a much more effective, inclusive, transformational way than women do. I should also add, Veronica, very quickly, women have 4 out of the 5 capabilities, whereas men only have 1. And I think that's really telling again in terms of who has the freedom to lead in this transformational way and who doesn't.
Yes, I'm interested in your perspective. So if the future is female, to co-op a phrase, and we're looking at the changes in leadership, it's still a very male-dominated leadership everything. Louise yesterday spoke about the abysmal statistics related to general councils and gender equality within general councils. We look at CEOs, the top Fortune 500 CEOs, majority are men, white men at that. So how do you see going forward getting not only men to understand, but just like everyone to understand that more women need that seat at the table? And essentially, how do you go about fixing the workplace or trying to fix when you're already coming in at a disadvantage?
I'm so glad you asked this question. And I've worked in diversity and inclusion. I've worked in a lot of industries. My last role was with Netflix. Prior to that, I worked at the UN. I've worked in oil. I've worked in tech. I've worked, across a range of sectors. And the thing you consistently find is that when it comes to advancing a diversity and inclusion agenda, the challenge is people aren't very clear on what the problem is we're trying to solve for. So what happens is we tend to adopt off-the-shelf solutions, and invariably those solutions either focus on the policy level. So writing, a policy for flexible work, maternity leave, and we think that base level policy work is enough, or it tends to focus on how do we change women through women-focused mentoring, coaching, development programs, all of this effort to try and change how women lead to fit into workplaces, and none of it's worked. And so the challenge is with where we're at now, yes, companies are committed. Yes, companies want to see change, but they're still not very clear on what is the problem we're trying to solve for. So if you go and ask your average leader, hey, how does inequality work? Or how do you practice inclusive behaviors? You're not going to get the response that you think you will. In fact, I've done it as part of my research. And invariably what you get is, I don't really know. I'm not sure what's being asked of me. The average manager doesn't know how to lead in a way that's inclusive. And that's why the McKinsey study that came out this year shows while companies are becoming more diverse, they're also becoming less inclusive. Because valuing the diversity and the different sort of perspectives people have is quite different to getting that into your organization. And so what we need is the shift in leadership. And, for me, this is a contextual cultural problem. Inequality exists in those day-to-day moments, right? We all know those moments where somebody ignores you, speaks over you, makes a sexist joke, makes a racist comment. Those are the moments that matter. And so the difficulty is, how do you create an environment where people are behaving and showing up in a way that values difference? And, for me, that really stops and starts with leaders. Equality is an invitation for leaders to lead, because leaders set the standard for what good looks like every day. They get to decide what behaviors get rewarded, endorsed, what behaviors are really the standard for what good looks like in terms of how they're showing up and what they accept within their teams. And so leaders drive culture, and culture drives experiences of inequality. So if you're going to start anywhere, start with leaders. And it actually is to their benefit, again, because the majority of boards and leadership teams that I work with are all white men. And so I spend all day, every day, working with white men to help them understand, hey, you need to drive cultural change here. And this is why it serves to benefit you. You're going to get increased innovation, increased, productivity. It's ultimately better decision-making, and all of that will make you more competitive. And so I think for me, it's not only understanding what the problem is, but it's also making a personal commitment to change. Right now, companies talk about D&I as if it sits out there without realizing this is fundamentally how your business works. This is the leadership and business imperative. If you don't get this right, you simply won't be able to compete today or in the future world of work. We know that the diversification of customers, the diversification of talent, increasing changes in technology are all driving the need for a more inclusive workplace. So for me, it just so happens that a more inclusive way of leading is a more effective way of leading. And, we really need to make that case so that companies start to adopt the right solutions.
And many of the women at Quorum are leaders in their field. If not within leadership, they are leadership in their companies. And so how do we look to leverage sort of the idea of allyship? And perhaps, I'm a white Latina, I see myself as such, but when others see me, they see Latina without the white in front of it many times. And so I often enter rooms and I am diversity. I don't see myself that way, but many do. So I'd like to be an ally. I'd like to speak up for others. How do we as leaders enter that space and do that in a way that does effectuate change?
I think the first thing I would say is we need to go beyond allyship. So I think being an ally is not enough. And the reason it's not enough is it tends to be pretty performative. So what we see, it's sort of this big bugbear of mine. We'll see leaders, suddenly take an interest in D&I, stand up there, talk about D&I, why it's good for business, why it's good for their organization, without ever making the connection that actually it's good for them. And so what it becomes is very performative, and a lot of it is helping women. And invariably that helping, adopts that whole fix the individual school of thought. And so for me, what we need to do is move beyond allyship to what I call becoming a success partner, realizing that your success is tied to my success because we both need an environment where we're free to be ourselves and to be valued for that. And so the greatest thing any leader can do is recognize that a more equal workplace serves to benefit them, and to be able to finish the sentence in terms of how that actually takes place. So for me, a more equal workplace benefits me because I can be myself, I can speak up, I can lean into my strength. And in doing that, I'm going to be more effective at work. And if you can't finish that sentence, you haven't made that personal connection to this work, and it becomes really performative. And I think that personal connection, I've noted, particularly with white male leaders, is incredibly important, because that's the moment they understand this is not about men and it's not about women. It's how do we make our workplaces work for everybody? And that old school win-lose mentality no longer serves us. And so this is the shift that we have to make. And I think when leaders make that, they also recognize that solving inequality that you yourself never have to experience is the ultimate privilege. And it is an honor and a privilege to do this work. And so I think when leaders make that connection and start to see it, some of the actions they'll be taking as real, true allies and success partners is, one, to invest in building their awareness. So being able to answer my question when I ask you, hey, how does inequality work? Because you've done the work, right? You're educating yourself, you're building that awareness. Awareness is a practice. It's something all of us have to do. So invest in educating yourself. There are hundreds of books, hundreds of podcasts. I'm even happy to send you a resource list to get you started, right? So that is the first piece. Build that awareness, because too many leaders are in denial around how inequality works. The second piece is apply that awareness to your organization. So with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, we saw the rise of anti-racism work. We saw the rise of awareness raising. But when that doesn't translate into understanding, hey, how is this playing out in my workplace? We don't see the action and the change. And so my recommendation to leaders, as you're learning about these concepts, like in my book, I outline 17 barriers all women face throughout their careers in different ways and in different amounts. Apply that thinking to your workplace. So how's this showing up in my organization? What does that mean in terms of my leadership capabilities? And for that, I'd really recommend you take 5 actions around really trying to think through how's this playing in my workplace. So you could sit down with your team and ask them these 5 questions. What does inequality look like in our team environment? What would a more equal workplace look like to us? What are 2 to 3 things we can do over the next 12 months to create that type of environment? What am I not doing as a leader today to create that type of environment? And what would you like me to start doing? And if you just asked your team those 5 things, you'll get a sense of how this is playing out in your environment, and you'll get that understanding as to what inequality is looking like. And then I think for every leader, it's taking all of that and committing to sort of 2 to 3 things you're going to do to really try and drive a culture that values difference. So awareness, understanding, and action. Let's see.
I think that's great. And I like this idea of turning from allyship to a success partner, because we just started Pride Month. It's probably one of the larger performative months for corporate brands across the world, and we see it in action pretty clearly. And so as leaders, taking that step from, yes, I support the cause to here is how I support the cause, I think is a super important way. And I'd love to discuss, the behind the scenes, like how can, that is one action to take for your team and present it. But I know there's lots of day-to-day moments where we can look to be those success partners without essentially taking credit or looking at that. And I know you've spoken about it before, the idea of it's not a one-time situation, it's an everyday, how we can take those little steps as well as the larger gestures to be a success partner.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've got a good example as to how this plays out across that awareness, understanding, and practice, if we've got time for it. But I know as a white woman that my whiteness, creates a certain amount of unearned benefit in organizations, right? Because I fit the default standard, which is white, male, heterosexual, for what good looks like in organizations. And so by default, through no effort on my part, it's that much easier for me to assimilate into organizations. It's that much easier for me to be associated with what good looks like simply because I'm white. And I accept that as a researcher. There's a huge amount of data to back this up. And as a result of that, instead of living up to my privilege by trying to align to that standard of what good looks like, I choose to spend it. And I choose to spend it generously because it's an unearned benefit that I get. And how I spend it is investing in my awareness of trying to understand what are the challenges, what are the barriers that racial and ethnic minority women experience in organizations because workplaces devalue difference. And so I invest in that awareness. I invest in understanding, hey, how's this playing out in my work environment? What are the things I should be paying attention to in my work? And one of those barriers is something known as the performance tax, where we know that traditionally women, because they don't fit that standard of what good looks like, they've got to work almost twice as hard as the average male to be seen as just as good. And we know for racial and ethnic minority women, you've got to work even harder than white women. And so the other day I get a call, this was a while ago, from a manager who says, hey, Michelle, your colleague, she happens to be a Black woman. I said, yes, she worked in my team. He said, I'm just not sure if she's quite right to present at this event. And she happened to be one of the best trainers we had, a resume, incredibly experienced, incredibly qualified, actually more qualified than me to present on this particular topic. And so I was like, on what basis are you saying this? Have you watched her, present? Have you read her CV? Do you know her background? No. Okay. Have you heard of the performance tax? And that was my opportunity to explain to him, hey, you're actually creating a barrier to her advancement here and you might not be aware of it. So how about we correct that behavior and give her a chance to, present, and then we can give her feedback. And he did, to be fair to him, he did. She went and presented, she did a great job, and she got excellent feedback, and he learned a lesson about a barrier. Now, to this day, she will never know that I did that. And why? Because I didn't do it for her. I did it for me. I recognize that an environment where it's okay to openly discriminate against an employee on the basis of their race is an environment where I'm not safe either, because it's an environment where we devalue difference. And so making leaders aware of the barriers, using the barriers as opportunities to understand how we're all contributing to inequality is how we solve inequality. And so that's an example of how you can take action and move beyond being just an ally to a real success partner to the people that you work with.
Well, that when we spoke, I know you spoke a lot about spending your privilege, and I've incorporated that a lot into how I speak to other people at the company and how I've presented. Just this week we gave a presentation to our Rainbow Alliance, and that was a big theme of spending as much privilege as you can at all times. I love to talk about, the quorum is all about taking action. You've already touched on it in terms of what we can and can't do. But in terms of advancing women by taking action for ourselves, for each other, and for the broader community in order to create change, what action for impact are you most focused on at the moment? I know that you recently distributed the 100 Actions for Equality Challenge. So if you'd like to just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, look, I think every year around International Women's Day, I get asked to speak at events, and I have spoken at now 305 events in the last 14 months. That is a lot. And at every event, people will say, what can I do? And I get really frustrated by this because you just have to Google ally and you will get actions you can take. But I thought I'd make it easy for everybody. So I came up with 100 actions for equality, and you can find these at www.100actionsforequality.com. And they're 100 small acts of inclusion people can take every day to build a workplace that really values difference. And so I encourage you to look at that if you're thinking about where to start. But I would really suggest to everybody, do the work when no one's watching and invest in reading about these topics, learning about these topics. I have a podcast every week. We feature incredible guests who share a fix for equality, who share how inequality works. It's a great resource for learning. But that's just one. There are hundreds of authors out there, hundreds of podcasts out there. Really invest in doing that work and build your equality muscle in terms of understanding what is the problem we're trying to solve for. And I think without doing that, a lot of your actions that you take are quite performative. In fact, one of the fixes is to educate yourself about inequality before you take any of the actions, because otherwise, it's just very performative. It's like, look at me, I'm doing all the stuff, I'm helping women. We don't need your help. We're good. We've got 4 out of the 5 capabilities that are required in the future world of work. What we need you to do is solve the inequality you create. And so I think that starts with not only learning about these topics, but then understanding, hey, how am I contributing to this? How's my inaction and my silence contributing to the inequality others experience? And I think that is really where you start to see real change happen.
I love the idea of having a tool to just kind of, it's like that website here, let me Google that for you. I know we've all been in those meetings recently, or not recently, but I'd say in my recent career, I know I've been in meetings where men at the table or other women at the table, people at the table have said things that are not great. And when you approach them on it, the feedback you get is, well, I'm old. And so you have to tell me what I need to do to change. And it's trying to shift that perspective from the workplace to get people to understand that it's not the burden of the underrepresented group in the room to tell you how they need to change, that you need to change. It's your responsibility to get that knowledge is really important. I love just having a tool at hand. I do know that you have great news to share in terms of a new book, perhaps on the horizon that we can all look forward to add to our reading list. Would you like to discuss that?
Yeah, look, this is the first place I've actually spoken about it. So, I mean, one thing I did just want to say before I dive into the book about those actions and what you just shared, it's absolutely not for people who are experiencing inequality to have to solve it, right? And so I think what I encourage anybody to do who's watching this and who feels uncomfortable by anything I've said, that's so great. It means I've said all the right things. So what I encourage you to do is lean into that discomfort, lean into anything I've said that's made you a little uncomfortable, and try and explore that. Approach it with some curiosity and try and understand, hey, why is that making me uncomfortable? Because that's normally the area that you need to do the most work. And so really leaning into the discomfort of situations rather than sort of sitting back and wanting to be spoon-fed, as you shared. The goal is to show up in a way that's curious and open to learning about, how you might be contributing to inequality, even if you're not aware of it. In fact, most leaders aren't aware of it. They're in denial about it. So it's a very important starting point, is that awareness piece. I think in terms of my next book on the awareness front, so my next book's called Read the Air. It'll be published by HarperCollins Business, and it comes out in 2023, so a little while to wait yet. But it's all on the future world of work and how we navigate the informal processes that exist in workplaces. And how do we do that in a way that benefits everybody? So these informal systems exist in workplaces, like office politics, but too often they've been sort of used in a very negative way. And so my work looks at, as workplaces become more and more informal, how do we navigate that in a way that benefits everybody? So I'll be sharing that, and that is based on 10 years of research. So I'm very excited to share the findings of that in the next book.
Thank you. It's interesting. I jumped on the Lean In bandwagon. It came at a time when I was just out of college, or probably in college, and when the book was released, it was kind of the perfect timing. As a young professional, I thought to myself, there's no way I can succeed in the legal field without being more aggressive or without being assertive to myself and things like that, not acknowledging that I had all these different layers to my personality that wasn't just in your face. So your talks about lean in and the lack of research there really well, I will say I was part of the Lean In circles. I led a group, and very similar to Quorum, it was a teaching experience where all the women who showed up brought many times. We talked about how to invest and finance and how to brand yourself and things like that. So it developed in a way that was very fulfilling without changing ourselves as people. So it was a natural growth plan. I think even the women who participated saw that perhaps the basis wasn't exactly all there.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like I'm all for strengths-based approach to development. So absolutely, like we can develop ourselves, we can continually improve ourselves, but it's how do we approach it? And how do we approach it with the messaging of, look, this is leaning into your strengths rather than saying you're fundamentally flawed in some way and we need you to change who you are to fit into workplaces that, you know, based on a lot of good data shows even if you change who you are to fit into them, you're still not going to be valued or treated in the same way as your male colleagues. And so I think that's the message is, you know, how do we create workplaces where people don't have to do that because we recognize and value the difference they bring.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And I think with that is our time. And so once again, thank you so much for joining us today. This is always a pleasure to speak to you, and I'm happy I was here to share it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
So thank you, Veronica and Michelle. That was such a great conversation. We really appreciate those viewpoints. A couple things that came up for me, I don't know, and listening to that was thinking about how the current state of work doesn't work for anyone, which is a fascinating idea because often we believe it works for one group and not for others. And so I think there's something very interesting in that. I loved the comment about the leaders really have to lead. This is about leadership. This is a leadership problem, you know, so it's not a bottom up, it's a top down. And so there needs to be some serious work done on that and how leaders are creating a cultural shift. I also loved, and Veronica mentioned this too, I loved this notion of the evolution from allyship. We know in order to get the change, we can't do it in a vacuum. We all have to be involved, you know, in getting change done collectively. So, but I love the idea of moving from allyship to becoming a success partner. That seems really fascinating. And it sounds like from no matter where we sit in the world, greater education about what it's like for somebody else could go a very long way. So those were some of the things that I picked up. I'm sure you all picked up other amazing things as well. It was jam-packed with lots of great information, that session. So the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to move to breakouts shortly. The breakouts, like we did at the beginning of the morning, we'll throw up a slide that tells you which breakout to join. The breakout session buttons to join is at the bottom of the page that you're on. So just scroll down and then click on the Join tab. If for some reason you don't find your name on the list, by all means, just join a group. We would be delighted to have you, so don't hold back. This breakout will really be about how do we advance the notion of allyship and success partnerships in order to get the change done. So that's going to be some of the discussion that we'll be having in these breakouts. The one thing we wanted to offer this morning, or I should say this afternoon for some of you, is a quick bio break before we head into the breakouts. So what's going to happen is we're going to give you a few minutes to take a quick break, and then we will throw up the slide on which breakouts for you to go to, and then we'll start our interactive discussions around getting change done in the places where we work. So that's our next step. Enjoy your quick little coffee bio break, whatever you can use for that. And then we will see you in the breakouts at 10:20. So hopefully that works for everybody. We'll see you in a bit. And then we'll come back as a group again at 11. So just to give everybody a sense of timing. So 10:20 for your breakouts, and then 11 for the next keynote speaking opportunity. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you in a bit. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this last breakout session as much as I did. Just sort of talking about this whole notion of allyship and talking about success partners, talking about how workplaces need to be fixed. I thought the stories people shared and the ideas everyone had were fantastic, at least in my group, and I'm sure you experienced the same. So next on our agenda, we have a great program here planned for you. We're going to be talking about women's health. I hope you enjoyed this how we care for ourselves and each other. Just sort of talking about this notion of as it relates to that, it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce you to two incredible women who care a lot about this space. First, Beth Garner, who has really dedicated her entire career to helping women evolve and care for their physical and mental health. She has worked tirelessly to educate, myth bust, and draw attention to important issues for women that are life-changing, literally. She has used her platform and science to help advocate for the support women need, particularly women of color. We are so thrilled to welcome Beth back to HOW to hear her thoughts on this very unique time in history related to health and really related to women's health. So fascinating to get your perspectives at this moment, Beth. For me, when I think about Beth, she's an absolute inspiration. She is compassionate, and she is intent on making the world a better place. So you're in for a treat to hear from Beth. Marta Hill Gray is not only a highly valued board member at Quorum, but she has spent her career advising companies in multiple industries on their growth strategies through improved marketing, communications, and partnerships. Additionally, she has been and continues to be an important advocate for women's leadership, marginalized women, and women's health. When I think about Marta, I think about the fact that she is a lifelong leader, she is an activist, and she is a sage. She is also a bunny, lovable in every way, just so you know. So, with those two intros, I'm going to hand things off to you, Marta, to get us started, and you're really going to enjoy hearing from these two dynamos. So off you go, Marta.
Thanks, Meg. Well, being a bunny is a high status in my world, so thank you. I'm going to take that as a compliment. I am so excited to talk to my friend, Dr. Elizabeth Garner, who is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever known. We've known each other for some time, and I met her when she was working on a birth control patch that was trying to get through FDA. It was a lower dosage than one that was already on the market. And I'm going to say, she will not perhaps take credit for this, but she single-handedly managed a group of people at the FDA so beautifully that it will live with me forever. So aside from being all that, we are happy to have you, Beth, and thank you for returning to HOW. You were with us before in New York and shared with us your extraordinary life story, which for those of you who missed it, that's a whole nother 3-hour idea. But for today, we're going to have you come back and just talk about, can you just share with us some of the newer developments in women's health and what you see on the horizon, what we all should know as women, and then also where the pandemic fits into some of this, what perhaps you could tell us about that.
Sure, Marta, and it's so much fun to be speaking with you as usual. And I will also say that the HOW event, I think it's now almost 3 years ago, was just amazing for me too. I mean, what a great and wonderful group of women. And I just thought the interactions were just so special and unique. So it's awesome to come back and chat with you. So I think it's been, honestly, the last couple of years have been to me, really, really exciting. Obviously, as a women's health advocate and someone who, you know, for my career, also am pretty much 100% focused on women's health. Any things that I see happening, any new developments for me, I'm always, you know, really excited about. So there are several things I think of note that, you know, women should be aware of that have happened. And first, I guess I'll focus on kind of the business side of things, right? Because certainly as it, you know, in terms of sort of new treatments that are on the horizon, new treatments for, you know, longstanding conditions that women have dealt with, are to me very exciting. And I think over the past many years, there's been sort of a sense of disappointment somewhat that sort of the big folks, some of the big guys as we call them, which is probably the best, not the best word, but some of the larger companies, right, have tended to move away from developing new treatments, new products, devices in women's health. And what we're starting to see is there's almost a competition now for who's going to come back and be the biggest. So it's great to see. So as an example, Merck just spun off its women's health products into a new company called Organon. That literally happened in the last couple of days. We've known it was going to happen for more than a year now, but it really is happening now. So, and they plan to be, and they're saying this openly. They want to be the top women's health company. So to me, that's exciting, right? Because they've got resources. Another really exciting thing that happened is that Bayer, another huge women's health company, acquired Candy Pharmaceuticals, which is a company working on innovative non-hormonal medication for menopause. Yay for hot flushes, right? So that's huge because, again, that's putting more resources into a long-standing problem that just simply has not been addressed at all, other than with hormonal therapy, which, and we all know the issues there. Myovant, which is a very important smaller women's health company, announced an enormous collaboration with Pfizer. So again, Pfizer now saying we're getting back in, you know, the women's health game, if you want to call it that. And this is one of the biggest deals we've seen of a big company like Pfizer with a smaller company like Myovant, which we believe, and you know, the collaboration itself seems to maybe have been focused somewhat on Pfizer's drug relugolix, which was shown to treat prostate cancer. So some of the skeptics are saying, "Oh, this was more about prostate cancer." But what I'm seeing, even in the last few months, is first of all, Myovant's product was approved for uterine fibroids very recently, and it appears that Pfizer is really going to help out with sort of, you know, getting that out there to women. So again, that's huge. So those are sort of the big business things I think that have happened. You already mentioned the approval of the Agile patch, which was really exciting. And, you know, the first low dose contraceptive patch, which I believe has been needed for many years. Phexxi, which is a new contraception, non-hormonal contraception, was also approved very recently. So those are new methods available for women in contraception, always very important. And then I mentioned Myovant's approval in uterine fibroids. The drug elagolix from AbbVie was also approved in uterine fibroids. And this has been a long-standing need, right? I mean, for years and years and years, all we've had to treat uterine fibroids really is mostly surgery. And even still today, I mean, 300,000 hysterectomies still get done for uterine fibroids every year. And that's just way too many. So hopefully these new products will help to reduce those surgeries. And then just more generally, I think there's clearly been a real boom happening in femtech, right? We're just seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies being, being started, and a lot of these by women, which is great. And I think these innovations in this particular area will help, hopefully, to continue the focus on women and to sort of, really push investors to start moving much more towards investing in women's health, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later as well. And then I guess lastly, I would say it feels like there is just a lot more talk and communication and openness. And, we're seeing books like the Menopause Manifesto that you were telling me about the other day that I'm now so excited about and should have known about before. But there are, a number of women doctors now, writing, speaking, posting, about women's health and just encouraging women to talk openly about their health issues. So all of those, I think, are really great developments in the last few years. In terms of the pandemic, what I feel it's done mainly in a positive way for women's health is that I think the pandemic has really helped to kind of usher in, if you want to call it that, a whole new level of awareness, right, around very, very longstanding inequalities in health in general, right? But then it's sort of helped to sort of get a new focus on particular disparities in women's health. I think, we're all seeing a lot more out there about maternal mortality rates in the US and the increased risk for women of color to die having a baby in this country, right? Than even in some, developed countries around the world. We have much, much higher rates. Our rates, of death for women of color in this country, dying in childbirth are practically the same as many developing countries, which is just a terrible thing. And I think the pandemic has really made all of that just more obvious. And so we're starting to see a lot more conversations about all of this, and hopefully not just conversations, but real solutions is what I'm hoping for. So a lot of progress, a lot of exciting things. You know me, I'm always like, but we've got such a longer way to go. So that's still true.
Well, one thing I'm just going to interject, because I think a lot of women don't know this, but on the Agile patch, when you did clinical trials, that company was one of the first companies to include women of color and women who had a certain body mass index, which had never been done in birth control before. And I think all women should know about this, because I think it's a powerful bit of information that we have not all been measured equally when it comes to drug treatments. And that's a new standard that is starting to come, I hope. Could you just talk about that a little bit and share with us sort of how that evolved and what that means for us in the future in terms of women, our bodies, and safe care, safe treatments?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been recognized for so long, right? Just as you said, that women are vastly underrepresented in clinical trials in general. Obviously, women are not underrepresented in trials of women's, products, right. But women of color and lower socioeconomic status, et cetera, are dramatically underrepresented in women's, studies of women's products or women's devices. And, there are differences, right, in the way various women react to, various medications, even to devices and so on. So it's critical to, as FDA puts it, I'll give them the credit here, that you need to study representative populations, right, of whatever the population is that you plan to, provide your product to. You've got to have studied it in the same sets of people so that you can tell how it's going to work, what the safety issues might be. And so, yes, especially in contraception, historically, and understandably, I guess you could argue, companies tended to enroll women who were, let's say it, less likely to have a pregnancy on their medication, right? Because then you come in with very, very high efficacy rates and generally very low incidences of, adverse events of various types. If you do a study that involves everybody, and for hormones in particular, it's well known that, that weight, for instance, affects how well hormones work, and can affect the safety of hormones as well. And we certainly agreed with the FDA, and we believed it was very important to study everyone. Well, what that meant was by enrolling patients of every shape, size, color in our trial, we did have a very representative population. In fact, if you look at the percentage of Black women, it was very similar to the US population, a little higher than the US population, actually. The mean body mass index, weight, all of that looked just like the US population. So it indeed was really a representative trial. But what that meant, of course, was indeed that the efficacy rates for the Agile patch were lower than has typically been seen in contraceptive trials. And that was precisely sort of the problem, that Agile encountered. Was we brought these results to the FDA, and our results were then compared against historical trials that had very, very different populations. And that was really the crux of the whole discussion, right? As you followed it. And I think what we really needed to do was was exactly to have that advisory committee where experts in the area would understand what we were describing. And once they had the ability to truly understand what we had done and what the data represented, clearly you saw that they were like, well, of course this should be approved, right? It was very sort of straightforward for them in many ways. And I hope that was not only important for specifically the Agile patch, but that's going to affect how FDA thinks about all of their products, all of the products that they review going down on into the future. And I hope that it's encouraging for developers as well to be more comfortable and confident in enrolling representative populations.
And this would happen in heart disease, where women and men are so different. I mean, so many different areas. So thank you for that. I think the business of pharma and medication and treatment is definitely tainted. And sadly, I think women pay a very high price, or have historically. So yay, Beth, for helping us change that. Okay, now we're going to talk about something else. Stigmas associated with being female. You recently had an article in the Harvard Medical School magazine, and you said, and I'm going to read it, so don't hold this against me. Stigma, myth, and lack of access to basic interventions have also touched women in my family. Close relatives have suffered alone and died because of prolonged silence and inadequate resources. These are the stories that truly drive my mission. So today, we'd like you to speak to how the stigma of being female continues to affect women's health care. And we've already talked about that a little bit, but maybe you could speak to that a bit more. And to your
So thank you, obviously, for mentioning the article. It took me a while to do that because, honestly, I've been thinking about doing this article, this essay. Really, I think it was the How event that, really sort of forced me to really just kind of put my thoughts together. And then ever since then, and realizing sort of the impact, as you said, on close family members was really, for me, that was the sort of the moment of, wow, this is major, right? I mean, it's often when you realize issues, right? It's often not until people recognize how it's selfish, but it's true, right? Until you recognize how issues affect you or your family, that you then start to speak out, right? If you look at a lot of, rare disease developments, companies you will find that the founder has somebody, usually a child with a rare disease, so that's how it works. So for me, I'd had this essay in mind for quite a while, and then gladly had the opportunity to actually finally write it. And yes, for sure, stigma, myth, lack of access, all those things have directly affected me and my family in particular. And I think for me, stigma is so important because there's just what it is, right? Which is stigma, that I think is just wrong, simply. But I think the fact of realizing that it's not just that. It's not just that it's unfair or that people can't speak out and that sort of thing. It's the fact that, stigma can lead, just as you said, directly to death, right? And it can lead directly to, if not death, very, very serious conditions, right? And those are some of the things I wrote about in the essay. So it's for me became, sort of a life-threatening issue in a way. And that sounds dramatic, I know, but you think about just the couple of examples that I wrote about there, these are happening every single day. So women are silently suffering from whatever it might be, abnormal bleeding or, you know, a breast lump, and just like, I can't, you know, I just don't want anyone to see this. I shouldn't be talking about this. You know, no one wants to know about this. And these are the women that I saw frequently when I was practicing, who would come in very late in the game, right? When they'd had a mass in the abdomen for months and months and months, or years even. So for me, it's such a powerful driver to me to really want to do what I can, at least, to you know, to eliminate, not just reduce, but eliminate stigma. And it goes even further than that, which is, you know, the attention that women's health gets, I also believe is, or the lack of, I should say, attention, is also a result of stigma, right? Because how can we as women expect men who to this day are still largely in power and largely still the decision makers, how can we expect men to understand or become invested in, become interested in the experiences that we have if we're not even talking about them? It's just not possible. It's not going to happen, right? So men understand the issues they deal with, or their dads or their brothers or whoever, but they certainly don't understand what women are going through. So menopause, I think, is a great example. Women tend not to talk about menopausal issues. We don't talk freely about hot flushes. We certainly, if we're sitting in a meeting surrounded by men and we have a hot flush, we don't say anything, right? I would love to get to a place where women can sit in an office, in a meeting with men and say, oh my God, I am just having such a terrible hot flush. Just hold on, guys. Hold on for a minute. Let me get over this, and then we can resume the conversation. And just have that be totally normal. Imagine that. Or maybe even crazier, for women to be able to say, sorry, guys, I'm on my period today. I may have to, you know, walk out a few times because, you know, it's a gusher. I'm bleeding heavily. I have fibroids. I'll be back. Like, can you imagine? It's hard for me to imagine, but I would love to get there. So I think the more that we are able to speak out, you know, and talk about not only the normal experiences like menstruation, menopause, but imagine this. Imagine women speaking out about a miscarriage at work or infertility, you know, and those things. I mean, we barely speak to each other about those things, never mind just talking about it openly in, again, the work setting, for example. So, you know, I think until women can really sort of speak out, we won't be able to move the needle forward.
And don't you also think it's sort of normalizing women's health, normalizing our bodies and things that happen to us that we have constantly lived in shame of and don't want to talk about it. It doesn't exist. It's our private horror. Well, guess what? No. I'm with you.
I mean, you know, a lot of folks, when they talk about women's health or women's issues or whatever, you know, bring up the fact, and it's just so obvious, you know, women make up 50% of the population, right? Well, we do. And so, you know, and yet we tend to, you know, feel like we're alone in whatever it is we're going through, right? So the more awareness there is that, for instance, you know, let's think about miscarriage. Well, probably up to 10%, if not more, I'm guessing it's a higher number, of pregnancies, and I'm talking pregnancies that have already been recognized, right? Say on an ultrasound, end up miscarrying. That's a huge number. It's a relatively small percent, but it's a huge number. So without a doubt, you know, if you're in a crowd of however many women, for sure there are others there who've experienced, you know, miscarriage. There's going to be more than one for sure. And yet it's complete silence on that issue, right? So I think that sense of aloneness, you know, I think as you get more information out there about how common things are, women will start to be able to speak more, even amongst themselves, but also, you know, with men as well.
Which brings us to, in your same Harvard Medical School magazine, you were quoted as saying, here we go, not only is half the world's population female, but women make most of the health decisions for their families. It's not that men aren't interested, they're just not aware. And what did you say? You told us of the hundreds of investors you've met with, 15 to 25 have been women. So when a woman's in the room, she's usually not the decision maker. And so, usually she demurs to whoever the male is in the room. So how are we going to get better at that? How are we going to have more women advocate for these things and have men understand more about why this matters?
Definitely a big, big, big issue. At the end of the day, investment, like it or not, right? That is what kind of makes the world go round, right? It's investment decisions that determine whose ideas, whose inventions, whose innovations get to be taken forward and developed, right? That's about investment. And ultimately, we need women to be in those decision-making roles, right? Because I think until that happens, we won't be able to shift these investment priorities. That's going to take time, right? That's just going to take time. But I think the way we get that going, first of all, is I think what we were talking about a few minutes ago, speaking out, and in whatever way we can, right? So I can speak out as, a part of industry. So when I'm meeting with investors, I tend to actually say on the call that I'm so happy there's a woman here today. So people are sort of surprised by that, but it's to point out, that it's a rare occasion. So that's one way that I can help. And then I think in our sort of whatever our platforms might be, to speak about it and speak about it and speak about it. And then I think we all just have to push for, in any way we can, helping women, like I said, just to get into those decision-making roles. And it's just as you said, I don't think, I'm going to say 1 or 2, less than 10, let's put it that way. I can be confident about that. Of any of the investors that I've spoken to over the last 7 years have actually been the ones who make the decisions. So they might, and it's so disappointing, right? Because almost uniformly, they're so excited during the conversation because they're like, wow, this is so great. And yet they take it back to whatever committee and nope, so it's the committee. It's who's heading the committee that we need to have in the leadership positions. And so that for me is just, it's organizations like Quorum, honestly, and other organizations that are doing this work to advance women in their careers and get them into those positions.
And so as we go forward, because I do think that women's health, of course, it's my passion, but I think all of us, if we're not healthy, we can't be effective in our work, in our business, in our lives. And so to be able to articulate and share with our friends and other women, and not to mention our medical practitioners, what's going on with us, there's no award for being brave on that and keeping it to yourself. And
You're so right.
Yeah, what can you so put on your Dr. Garner hat for us, and knowing that most of the women that are in our group are achievers and many have families and probably put themselves last, what would you share with us in terms of, given what you've seen when you were practicing, what do we need to be aware of? What do we need to be better about in terms of taking care of ourselves and really being our own advocate?
Yeah, and this is definitely something I heard talked about even yesterday here at this conference, right? Is, the need for self-care, the need to truly care, about yourself. And I think that's sort of, to me, even going beyond sort of even just the concept of self-care, right? Because as you said, I think, and especially the Quorum, membership, are women with great potential and with amazing achievements already. And you have to really care about yourself, right? And care for yourself in order to continue to make contributions. I know that I get worried sometimes when I'm exhausted or tired or whatever it might be. It's like, watch out, you have work to do here, take a break, and focus on ensuring that mentally and physically you're doing okay. So, I think there are various ways to do that. And, my husband he's a meditation type person. And, so he tells me every day, you gotta meditate. And I sort of, yes, I get it, but I'm not really a meditator, right? So I think you have to figure out what works. And I do think that definitely taking time and, introspection and all of that, if you want to call that meditation, then maybe I do meditate. But I think that we all have to sort of really stop, take a moment and identify what are the things that give us pleasure. So for a lot of women, for instance, who have children, maybe being away from the kids is sort of what you need to refresh, recover, whatever. For me, actually being with my kids does that, because I don't feel like I get to spend enough time with my kids. So I think, we all have sort of different ways of self-care, but at the end of the day, I think each individual woman has to sort of figure out what that is for herself. And I think also plan. I think you've got to find space for it. That is one piece of advice I would say, is find space and time for those important things that will help to keep you healthy.
Okay. And so the action for impact, and maybe that's what it is creating space. What are you focused on in terms of the impact you make? And what do you, and maybe that was what you would recommend, but what are you focused on, Beth? Because I also know that you are a woman of two cultures. And so maybe you could share with us kind of the wisdom of the culture that you're not currently living in, but what do you bring from that culture into your life and how you view everything? Maybe you could just give us a couple minutes on that, because I think the group that didn't meet you before would be interested to hear that.
Yeah, so definitely bicultural, multicultural. And, I talked in my essay about the power of women when they come together, right? So women in my remote rural village in Nigeria have these very solid and well-established groups by family, but where they come together and talk about their issues and solve problems and so on. It's an amazing, amazing model that I think can be brought here as well, and not necessarily formally, but what the Umwa does, they're called, has taught me is it's when women come together really that things happen, right? So Quorum is doing it. Other organizations are doing it. And so I think the action for me is definitely speak out. For me, if there's any takeaway, absolutely the time for yourself, the space, critically important. But for me, the action would be, let's all start speaking out, coming together as women, insisting on eliminating stigma. And I think that's the way we'll get the advances that we need in women's health.
You're just wonderful. I'm keeping you. She's a bunny,
so
folks.
Sweet, Marta.
You're the best. I also wanted to say, for those of you who would like to read Beth's article, because also mentioned in the article is one of our quorum members, our beloved Marcia Henderson. So maybe we can share that with the group, because I think Beth's article is brilliant and well worth reading. And since we referenced it, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to have a read and join the fan club with me. Thank you, Beth, for your time today.
Thank you.
The Quorum women love you, and you bring so much to us, and keep doing all the great work you're doing. Thanks.
Beth and Marta, thank you so much for that discussion. There were so many amazing nuggets in there, pieces of important information. I was encouraged to hear that there is more investment going on in women's health. I was also, I'm horrified by how little capital goes towards women in every aspect of women. And so that's something for me personally. I feel like there has to be more work done on how money flows. How does money flow to to equalize, get a more equitable environment going, and particularly women's health, which is the starting point of how we keep a society healthy, right? So amazing, so fantastic. I really appreciated, Beth, your comments about the fact that we need to raise our voices around our own health, first and foremost, our own self-care, but secondly, about what's going on for us. And that's such an actionable item for all of us. So I really love that and really appreciated those comments. And so we are now going to lead into, so sorry, I should finish. Thank you. That's my thank you. Really appreciate it. We're now going to move into breakouts where we focus on how we rise together, the whole theme of this event, and sort of touching on all the things that we've heard and learned, and how has that spoken to us, and what do we need to think about, and one component of that will be some self-care reflection in this next breakout session. So I'll remind you that what happens is we'll flash up on the screen breakout sessions that you've been assigned to. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, you'll see the breakouts. Just click on the join button. If you don't see your name, just choose a breakout and join it. And we will come back together here for just some closing remarks right around 12:20. So that's the plan, to come back here for quick closing remarks and enjoy the moment of sharing and exchanging with each other based on some of the inspired comments between Beth and Marta. So thank you. We'll see you soon at 12:20. Enjoy your breakouts. Hi, everybody. Can't believe that this is our last little moment together. It's actually feels hard to say goodbye. So I'm telling you, it's funny. But before we do that, I wanted to mention a few things. First of all, I hope you enjoyed those last sessions. They were so heartfelt and candid, and the sharing was amazing. And that's the amazing thing about women, I think, when we get together. I want to kick off the close with a moment of gratitude. I really want to offer thanks to our incredible speakers who gave so willingly of their time, and I think covered so much ground for us over the last 2 days in terms of the topics that they the thoughts that they shared and the topics that they covered. So we couldn't be more grateful to all of our speakers who really gave us a lot to think about. I want to thank our lead discussants, who are all members of the Quorum community, who helped keep the conversation going, inspired exchange. It's such a part of what this community is all about in terms of how we connect with each other. And I know it's hard to do virtually. It's so much more fun to do it in person, but I actually felt an incredible amount of intimacy in those breakout rooms, and a lot of really important ideas were exchanged. So I want to thank the lead discussants for that. I am so grateful to our board, the Quorum Initiative board. The board really helped us in so many ways to pull this event off. So I couldn't be more grateful for that. And I want to do a special shout out to Marta for all the work and time and effort that she gave to this event, to this forum. And of course, I would be completely remiss if I didn't give the most heartfelt thank you to Diane Silverman for everything that she's done to help make this time together so special and unique. And Diane, you're just a wonder, and we love you, and thank you for all of your hard work. I wanted to mention a few things that are coming up for Quorum for you to think about and hopefully participate in. We have several events planned for the summer, which Diane will be communicating to all of you. So please pay attention to her emails as they come through about all the great content that we have coming up, and we would love for you to join us. We have a very special, unique event that we're going to do for the very first time in the fall, and it will be in person for those in the US. I apologize to our colleagues in the UK, but we'll come up with something similar for across the pond as well. On October 2nd and 3rd, we're going to do our first ever Quorum retreat up in Narrowsburg, New York, which is about 2 hours from Manhattan. And we're going to do that over a weekend and allow us to test a different take time out of our crazy schedules and give ourselves a moment to be together. And will be a mix of content and self-care. That would be the way I would describe it for all of us. So we'll be communicating about that shortly. So mark your calendars. That's October 2nd and 3rd. And of course, it would never be a Quorum moment if we didn't talk about actions. We never leave a meeting when we come together as a group without talking about what next and what are the steps that we're going to be taking. As I mentioned at the top of the day today and yesterday, I feel like this is such an important moment. All of this disruption that's happened around the pandemic has required all of us to rethink. And it's definitely, I definitely think disruption is our friend, and it's our moment to really create the world we want to live in. So I challenge all of us to reflect more on what we've been exchanging on through the last 2 days, and to think very seriously about the actions that you're going to take, first and foremost, for yourself around self-care. That became a big underlying theme, and I think so important. And so that we take the action around the self-care, and then think about, as you're taking good care of yourself, what's the one action you want to take for others? What inspired you throughout these 2 days? What action that you want to get done? Something that you could start today. If you can't start today, maybe tomorrow. What's going to happen next week, and what's going to happen next month? I really want to challenge all of us to think about how we rise together to create an environment that's where women really do have a proper seat at the table, and equity is definitely the norm. So that's my first action item. My second action item is, let's all stay in touch. I know you've met a lot of people throughout these 2 days. If you don't have their contact information, we at Quorum are delighted to connect you with anyone you want to connect with. Also, we would love for you to stay connected with Quorum. We have an enormous amount of fantastic programming going on, so we would invite you to stay in touch and share what you have going on, because we'll share it with others. That's my second, stay in touch. The third one is join. If you're not part of the Quorum community, please join us. Join us in this movement of advancing women. We would love to have you a part of the community. And for those of you that are already part of the community, I'd really push us to all make sure we're taking time to connect with each other, show up for the events when we can, and stay connected, because we have such great work we need to do. And it's so much more powerful and palpable when we do it together. So my last and final action for all of us is, let's take good care of ourselves so we can take good care of each other. It's been such an honor and privilege to be with all of you these last 2 days. I wish you an absolutely fantastic weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Be well. Bye, everybody.